Based on the latest report, sitting U.S. President Donald Trump revived the trade war against Beijing on Friday, ending an easy truce between the two largest economies with promises to sharply hike tariffs in a reprisal against China, curbing the critical mineral exports. Now, there's no surprise today when we look at the U.S.-China relationship is getting more and more complicated. And of course, as I mentioned before, two largest economies are competing with each other, not only in this economic sense, but also in this technological aspect. How do we understand the latest announcement from President Trump? And also, what about the reaction from China? How can we understand the two countries will get better? Is it sooner or later? Well, ladies and gentlemen, it's my great honor to invite our distinguished speaker, who is Mr. Thomas Gehl. Mr. Gehl stands as a towering figure in a global business and a law. He's a visionary leader who commands influence across the most dynamic markets of the U.S. and China. And his role as a trusted advisor is further distinguished by appointments from President Bill Clinton to the Executive Office of the President's Council on Environmental Quality and ongoing service on United Nations advisory bodies. Well, Mr. Gehl, and welcome to The Missing Piece.
Thank you, Will. Nice to be here.
Absolutely, sir. Such an honor to have you on our show. I want to start by reading a tweet or a message that President Trump shared on social media. This is what he wrote, and I quote, "Don't worry about China. It will all be fine. Highly respected President Xi just had a bad moment. He doesn't want depression for his country, and neither do I. The USA wants to help China, not hurt it," end quote. Mr. Gehl, from your perspective, as I mentioned in the intro, the latest announcement that from the US to Beijing surely ruffle up feathers when it comes to economic agenda. At this moment, how do we understand this relationship between the two countries? And also, what do you make of the message from President Trump based on his social media posts? Your thoughts?
Well, I think that the message is definitely an olive branch that President Trump is extending to President Xi after some harsher talk earlier in the week, where President Trump has a tendency to bounce all over the place on different topics. So he'll 1 hour have 100% increase in the tariff, and then he'll have some kind words to try to ease the problems that he created with his earlier comments. But I think this is a very positive step forward, and hopefully will continue along this vein as we get closer to the hopefully November 1st meeting between the two leaders.
Again, Mr. Gehl, as we're looking at ahead, the two leaders were scheduled to meet possibly during the APEC Summit at the end of October. But meanwhile, we're looking at two unconventional players. One is President Trump, another one is President Xi. Some call it that those two unconventional players are more likely to create this what we call global disruption, especially in trade and in this economic changes. So from your perspective, how do we understand the phrase what we called global disruptions or global disruptors? Again, we know that both players are not playing the games as a conventional way, but meanwhile, there could be a lot of surprises. What do you say to that?
I think there are definitely going to be surprises. And I think that the Chinese message will be sharpened when the political bureau is meeting later this month and before President Xi's trip. So at that time, it will be very interesting to see how the more conservative branch of the Communist Party want to play this hand and what marching orders they'll be giving President Xi. President Trump, again, kind of makes his own calls. He doesn't listen to many people around him, I'm afraid. And so I think he, though, at the end of the day, wants to be seen as the art of the deal. So he feels that he's very accomplished at trying to get some negotiations, but I'm afraid that usually works against him on many areas. So I'm hopeful that both leaders can come with a positive agenda, because China and the U.S. should be the best of partners. We really complement one another on a world stage. And the problems that have been created by the ridiculous tariffs that President Trump keeps imposing and taking away just makes it very difficult, I think, for him to be an honest player to deal with. So it's going to be very interesting, and hopefully they will be able to meet, because that's going to be critical to the future.
There's no denying that today, when we look at the ongoing competition between US and China, and certainly that first thing comes to everyone's mind is the presence of AI. And we know this technological advancement really challenged the two countries to move forward and also to compete head to head against each other. But there's something else that most of us that who aren't really familiar is the presence of what we call the rare earth element export controls. So Mr. Gehl, from your perspective, again, based on the latest report, that the new trade steps were Trump's reaction to China dramatically expanding the rare earth element export controls. Now, let's go back to the beginning. Why is that crucial for both countries? And why is that so concerning, especially for the West? And we know that previously, President Trump also wrote a long message on Truth Social or on social media and regarding the China's intention to expand the relationship or even to bend the friendship from this economic standpoint regarding the rare earth element. Why is this so crucial and concerning to the West at this moment?
Well, the primary reason is the rare earth minerals, as people know, are essential for many high-tech applications. So from both computers, so being able to allow the new chip development, and as you say, to be able to utilize in the artificial intelligence network as that moves forward, because the chip development is crucial for be able to maximize the ability of AI. Also, military application, obviously. So many of the military arms that are used, the rare earth minerals are critical on that. China, has played it fairly brilliantly to be able to bring that up now, because they control 95 to 98% of all the rare earth minerals in the world. So that's why China ability to control that gives them a very strong hand as they go forward. And I think that we saw when President Trump was made aware of this, I think that's why on Friday we had the more upsetting news of installing 100% new tariff on China on November 1st. But then his later tweet, I think, is after some thoughtfulness about it, that he came to a more level approach and understands he needs to work with China to be able to accomplish the goals of having some access to the rare earth minerals. Now, whether China will bend on that or not, it'll be very interesting. So that they've already imposed, as of last Thursday, the ban on any military application. So the total ban isn't coming into December 1st, but military applications came in last week already. So it will already play a critical role in the United States' military development.
Some experts believe that regardless what President Trump posted on Truth Social or on social media, surely I would say we're not a surprise to China, because again, we know that today, under careful strategy or planning strategy, that both countries are very, very much careful in taking the steps to approach each other. But again, Mr. Gehl, from your perspective, I do want to ask the question, we know it's one thing to understand the words by reading the text, but it's something else to understand by asking for consultation or asking for advisory from people around, the leaders. So the next question to you is, how do we know that President Trump is very much sincere in sustaining this relationship with China? I mean, again, we're looking at there are so many countries are being sandwiched between US and China at this moment. And for example, the countries in Southeast Asia, we're looking at Vietnam, Cambodia, the Philippines, and those countries in Southeast Asia are very much concerned about this ongoing competition between the two countries. And some even call it because the competition that could create this global economic imbalance. So how do we know that President Trump is very sincere about the sustaining the relationship? And how do you think the countries in other region of the world should actually paying attention or be careful about dealing with both of them? What do you think of that?
I think it's a difficult area because I think, again, Trump does not have a political background. China has their Confucius methodology on picking and advancing leaders, so they're very well trained. So President Xi has had 40 years of experience becoming a very experienced politician, which is a different trait than just a real estate negotiator, which is what President Trump is. So they're going to be approaching it with different methodologies on how to accomplish it. And again, because they are so different in their approach, that it's difficult to predict what the outcome may be. I believe that President Trump understands that we need China, and better relationships will help the United States more than antagonism towards one another. China, I think, realizes that we're very complementary in what we can do. So opening up the trade routes, opening up the intellectual capacity, opening up the different high tech to flow between the countries would be the greatest advantage to everyone. The smaller countries do have to worry because they're collateral damage on it as it goes forward. You get the two big boys fighting, and the little kids, have to worry. Once mom and dad are having a problem, it creates a lot of tension in the family. So the more we can try to quiet that, the more we can get things back to a positive step, I think would be very, very positive. One of the problems is that the one thing that the Democrats and Republicans can agree on, the only thing I believe that they can agree on, is everybody hates China. President Trump, because he's not a true politician, can ignore that to a certain extent. And I think, again, look towards his own ability to, again, as I said, work the art of the deal, to be able to do something creative and outside the box to try to get President Xi and he to find the common ground that we need to find. Otherwise, if it starts to spiral down, it's bad for everybody.
Mr. Gehl, I got one more question before we move on to the next session. Again, looking ahead, we know at the end of October, APEC Summit is going to be one of the major news headlines around the world. Again, if everything goes well, President Trump is more likely to travel to South Korea to meet President Xi in person. Of course, there'll be a lot more intense discussion or meaningful conversations going on. But meanwhile, what can we expect at this moment? Especially one thing, again, you're the expert. People are still very concerned about the current Chinese economic situation. Post the pandemic, we've seen the slowness, and also we've seen the rate of the unemployment rate in China, and also the younger generations are actually struggling in terms of locating jobs and etc. So from your perspective, how do you think that the meeting in APEC Summit or even the trip to South Korea could actually help or even to boost this economic agenda for China? And how do you think other countries are able to react that what's happening in China right now, not just in this political agenda, but also in this economic projection? Your thoughts?
Yeah, there's a lot of different things going on in the China economy. China stock market, the Hang Seng, did very well this year until just a few days ago with the last round of problems. So it had a substantial uptick. Stocks like Alibaba doubled in its value during 2005. Tencent went up to 60% increase. So there have been some very good news in the economy for China. But you're right, overall, I mean, I live in China, so I feel it, and I feel for the people. Youth unemployment, the 20-something crowd are 25% unemployed for very good, people who've come out of highly ranked schools, Tsinghua, Peking University. Even those kids are having difficulty finding positions. It takes a year, 2 years sometimes. So that's very distressing. And I think that, there are opportunities to change. If we're able to increase everybody's economy, then we'll do better. The United States had some, terrible repercussions from the announcement of the tariffs and huge drops in the stock market. But then it also came back. So we've had the highest stock market that we've ever had in the United States. So I'm not quite sure what is going to really predict how the economies and markets are going to react to the different things. But always positive news helps everyone. So hopefully there will be a meeting at APEC. Hopefully it will be positive, and then I think we'll see a substantial increase both ways. I think that President Trump is hurting the U.S. economy more. He just, they put on $100,000 penalty for the H-1 visas, which I think is ridiculous because those are the best and brightest people who are coming to the United States. 80% of all new high-tech companies are formed by immigrants or first-generation immigrants. So to me, it's ludicrous that we would discourage that in any way. Our education system is the best in the world. We've only got 6% of the population. We've got 60% of the best universities in the world. So again, to have anything that taints that, I think is very counterproductive. So I'm not quite sure what the thought process is on that, but I hope that somebody is able to advise them to smarten up on this and encourage, international students, encourage highly qualified technical people from coming here to work to really help build our industry. I think it may be the best thing for China that he's doing these things because so many of the brilliant kids from China, want to come to the United States, but now they won't. So they'll be able to stay home. And I think China is really trying to encourage the international pool to improve here. There was just an announcement last week that there are several new programs in place that several areas around China are going to be used as special zones for high-tech people to come and work and have excellent salaries and benefits associated with it. So that's a very smart move on China's part to be able to encourage that talent to come and do it. I mean, China already graduates more engineers than the rest of the world combined every year. So there's a brilliant pool here. And so I think particularly if the United States is shutting out some of the Chinese students into the high-tech world, then that will only be to China's benefit, I believe, and that they can increase what they're doing even faster.
Mr. Gehl, I got two more questions before letting you go. Now, I'm very glad that you mentioned about the H-1B visa. Of course, that was a very, very surprising and also concerning to the international community. It was really hard to believe. Now, we know that within the political science field, there has been a saying is if you pray for the rain and you have to learn how to deal with the mud. Of course, we know that today when China produces the elites or produces the talents in engineering, in artificial intelligence, but meanwhile, people are still very concerned about the privacy issue, about the data sharing, and also etc. That could be rather complicated for a lot of countries, especially not only for the US, but also for the many companies in Europe and also around the world. So, Mr. Gehl, from your perspective, how do you think that we should actually fairly address the issue that, for example, if China were continue to roll out the bigger plans or even more grand strategies against the AI technology, against this engineering, or even things we can even possibly think about, but what about the data protection? What about the privacy protection? How do you think that China is addressing those issues, even for the bigger picture?
Well, I think that China has been, evolving in that area um, quite a bit over the last dozen years, and really 20 years, with the intellectual property protections, with becoming more sophisticated in data protection and security. I think that they have moved a great distance in where they are. And there's more to do, but I think they're learning every day. So I think that that's a problem for every country. Every high tech industry have a lot of problems that they need. Yeah, I think that as we discussed earlier, that China has made some great strides in this area, and have been improving over the last 20 years. I think that they are maturing to realize that they can't just go in and try to invade the privacy of the different companies on it. A great example was Huawei and the issues that went on with them a couple of years ago. I did a lot of research on Huawei and the founder, and was very impressed by things that I learned there. At that time, the U.S. was banning a lot of the Huawei products because they were saying that the communist government had a back door into the Huawei products. The founder was very clear that he said that China is not his customer. The world is his customer. He only sold about 25% of all of his products in China. The rest went internationally. And when people questioned him on what if the government is pressuring you and telling you they're going to put you in prison if you don't allow access to their to your software so that they can pry on other people, he said, let them put me in prison. I worked so hard, I could use a break. I can read, I can talk to my grandchildren. They have to feed me, they have to house me. So I have no problem with that. And the Chinese government is not getting access to our software. So I thought that was a very positive word. And that was 6 years ago. So I think we've only moved forward from there. I think President Xi understands that, China has to act as an international partner and not just as an independent nation. So I think that they're making some progress along those lines, and it'll be interesting to see if that continues. But you're going to have that suspicion out there. So I think that the government has to be more vocal in stating that they will not, try to do these things, will not try to access data, and then have some way of proving that to the world so that they can rely on China to a greater extent.
Mr. Gehl, I want to wrap up our conversation by asking you the last question. Let's talk about what's happening in the U.S. today. More than 5 days, this nation continued to see the government shutdown, and we know that today both Republicans and Democrats are not happy about the current situation. And also, we're trying to see if there's any possibility that both sides are able to sit down to revisit and open the conversation. But it doesn't look like it's going to happen very soon. On top of all that, up to October 25th, that our military service members and should be paid, but still, right now, the bills are up in the air because the government shut down. Mr. Gehl, from your perspective, again, based on everything we discussed, what do you make of the current situation in the U.S., and how do you think that both Republicans and Democrats are able to sit down, really have a meaningful conversation so that the federal employees are able to return to work and also able to get the ground running, and plus, on top of all that, continue to make sure that the nation is secure and well protected? Your final thoughts.
Well, I think that it's interesting that one of the issues now is not only the government shutdown, but that there's been a new member of Congress who's been elected that's a Democrat and will shift the power in the House. So the House Majority Leader now is afraid to reconvene the Congress, because then the extra Democrat will be sworn in. And interestingly enough, one of the first bills that they would address then is the congressional request for the Epstein files. So now the Epstein files rear their ugly head again. and that would require that the all of the government agencies, the FBI, the CIA, everybody who has any documentation on the Epstein files would have to produce that to Congress. And again, for obvious reasons, the president has been very hesitant about that, and so that's been a major issue for him this entire term. So even to the extent that the bill for the military to be paid goes unenacted, all these other concerns come in that appear to be tertiary, but I think are substantial drivers on it, because the Republican Congress take their marching orders directly from the president. Unfortunately, our Constitution was set up to have, the true separation of bodies between the executive branch, the Congress, and the Supreme Court. Unfortunately, the Supreme Court has been stacked on a more Republican basis. The Congress has been stacked to represent the White House. And so we don't have that true separation that I hope we can get back to, because that's how the United States government works best, if we have all those things in place.
That's right. Agree with you 100%. Well, ladies and gentlemen, such an honor to speak to Mr. Thomas Gehl. Again, Mr. Gehl stands as a towering figure in the global business and the law, and he's a visionary leader who commands influence across the most dynamic markets of both U.S. and China. Well, Mr. Gehl, thank you so much for your time. It's been a pleasure. We'd love to have you back on the show as we continue to explore the international affairs. So thank you so much for doing this.
You've been very kind, and thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure to be here with you.